Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. It is URC final week, Leinster against the Bulls on Saturday evening at Croke Park, 5 p.m. kickoff. So a first-time winner of this version of the URC. Later in the podcast, I'll also be getting an update from the Ireland women's team. They're in week 2 of their World Cup training camp. Brittany Hogan and co-captain Edel McMahon are going to be joining me for that. So we'll see how their World Cup preparations are coming together. Bernard Jackman and Johnny Murphy are with me for now. And lads, just when I mentioned the Women's World Cup, I was looking through the calendar earlier this morning. We've URC final this weekend, Lions at the Aviva next Friday. Then the Lions go off to Australia, so the following Saturday, all of that is starting. During which time Ireland have their two-test series, or two-test tour to Georgia and Portugal as well in the middle of all of that. Final Lions test brings us up to the 2nd of August. The Ireland women's team have their first World Cup warm-up match that day against Scotland. Then the following week, Ireland another World Cup warm-up match against Canada, and then 2 weeks later their World Cup opener against Japan. And by the time we get to the end of that World Cup, the new URC season is upon us. I don't think this podcast is going to be taking a summer holidays, unfortunately. There's one empty weekend without rugby between now and the end of next season, I think. Let's not complain. It's bloody brilliant. But yeah, these seasons are rolling one into the other. And it's going to be a busy summer.
Yeah. As long as you're happy to do a podcast with either one of the three of us with a super box or something like that in our hand or whatever holidays, then yeah.
I might see, can I arrange the same for myself? I don't know. But it is there is a hell of a summer ahead of us, Bernard. Just talking about it there, like we're talking about the end of a season, but we're going straight through into a Lion series. We've got Irish interest over the summer as well, and we'll be talking a little bit about that squad later on in this podcast as well. And then by the time all of that is wrapped up, we're on to a Women's World Cup and then straight into a new season.
Yeah, it's going to be relentless. And from the men's side of things, obviously, historically, the Lions tour has taken a lot out of players as well. So they'll have to be minded in the first quarter of the season. But then you've got a big November for Ireland, so there's not a huge amount of opportunity to do that with Champions Cup as well. And yeah, as you said, the women's in August. It's great for them because it's a time when people aren't used to rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, but there will be an opportunity for all rugby supporters to really focus on it without the distractions of the normal provincial or international stuff. So hopefully they have a really good tournament and can, I suppose, build on what there was some progress last year for sure. But yeah, it's a mad season, isn't it? And I know that World Rugby and we'll talk about R360 in a bit, but they're trying to find that balance between players playing a hell of a lot of games and getting the optimum rest time as well. But at the moment, it's completely out of sync.
Yeah, and I suppose, but the slight difference, I suppose, we are talking about the cross between men's and women's rugby as well. It's not like I know there isn't a huge gap between the start of or the end of the men's season and the start of the next one, but this full year of rugby, it is accounting for, there's a women's competition in there as well. It's not like the players essentially. The same players are going to be getting flogged across those 13 months or so. Anyway, we'll talk a bit more about that over the summer, I'd say, because as I mentioned, we're probably going to have a good few podcasts to come over the summer. The here and now URC Grand Final this Saturday at Croke Park. First final to take place out of South Africa, funnily enough. First to take place in Ireland in front of fans since Leinster beat the Scarlets in the Aviva in 2018. It's shaping up perfectly, Bernard. Two sides that have a lot of pressure on them to deliver. Leinster no trophy in 4 years. Bulls haven't won since their Curry Cup just before joining the URC. Bulls have lost 2 URC finals. Leinster have lost in 3 semi-finals. 2 of those were against the Bulls. And I suppose the quirky thing of it all is that these are the 2 teams that since the start of the URC in 2021 have both won the most number of games. Leinster have won 59 matches in that time. The Bulls have won 54. But neither of them have gone on to actually take a title. Throw in the new Ireland-South Africa rugby rivalry on top of that as well. There's a nice little pot of ingredients cooking ahead of this weekend.
Yeah, it's massive, and with Jake White and the Bulls being on such a good run of unbeaten form, their last tour to Ireland and the UK obviously beat Munster and beat Glasgow, so they get lots of confidence, and it's also the fact that they've beaten Leinster more than anybody in this competition. And Jake like what do you say if you're trying to take pressure off your team? It's the Irish team we're playing, and we're just the Bulls. But he did also recognize that he has World Cup winners in his squad, and the Bulls have recruited really well under Jake. Jake's a brilliant recruiter, but it's not the same level as the Sharks, who went out there and brought back a lot of high profile Springboks. Jake has kind of gone for players who he thinks will be available a lot more.
And
And
they seem to be a much tighter group.
yeah, yeah, they are. They are. They're definitely tighter than the Sharks anyway, and a lot more disciplined in how they play. They're still a little bit loose at times. I think Jake would prefer they were a little bit tighter, but he's struggling to really clamp down on some of that individual exuberance that they tend to have, and that can work as well. That can make them very dangerous. But it's a proper test for Leinster because it'll be chalk and cheese to what they faced last week or against the Scarlets or even against Northampton. This is a team who have unbelievable physicality, and we'll see that as their roadmap to winning. When they look back at the games they beaten Leinster, even back to the RDS a couple of years ago, it was very much that forward power, I think, and they're not just that, but that's certainly an area where they will look to build dominance, and they did against the Sharks. That for me. That was the upfront dominance was what led them to win, even though the Sharks played a bit better than they have been. So it's fascinating. They got over here. They flew in. They left Sunday, so got here Monday. They're up in the Radisson, and that's a big thing for them as well because normally they only land on a Wednesday if they're playing in Ireland. So just you still have to travel and it still takes a bit out of you, but it's a much better preparation for them. And yeah, I think they've had a lot of disappointments in this competition as well. And we'll see this as a great opportunity to pull off a huge scalp and really drive a nail into the mentality of Irish rugby that when it comes to big games, we struggle.
On what Bernard was saying there, Johnny, even about like their travel. I was out in they're kind of basing themselves training wise, I think, in St. Mary's Rugby Club on Templeville Road. I was out there yesterday. Jake White was doing a bit of media, and he made a big point of talking about those travel arrangements that they left on Sunday. Normally they don't leave till Tuesday on those trips, and it just gives them those extra couple of days to just get used to their environments, to shake off the rustiness of a flight. He also stressed as well that I think pretty much everyone this time round would have been flying either was it business class or first class. They weren't stuck in economy anyway, like they normally are on a lot of these long haul trips up to the northern hemisphere for these tours. They're they're clearly coming with their heads screwed on. The organization have backed them, and they've put an extra bit of budget behind their travel arrangements and things like that. I I know Leinster have home advantage and all that, but it probably isn't going to be as big as it normally would be when a South African team are coming to town.
Not in the previous years, and it is one of the big things that the URC, particularly when it gets to knockout stages, the logistics of the travel arrangements have always kind of scuppered people in terms of the frustration that can get for teams. They've looked at that, they made a plan, and they've put that, they've ticked that box. So that's not going to be an excuse. And they're addressing it straight off the bat, so it's not going to be on their it can't be an excuse at this stage. There's a huge kind of emotional charge from it as well, in terms of Conal Hendricks and everything that he said yesterday around the number 14, and he even went in. I found it very interesting that he spoke about Bloody Sunday and the history of associated to Croke Park, and how a little thing like he said for the players not to kind of go into to talk about it in a correct way so that nothing can be construed in a disrespectful way. And like all those kind of things really kind of set them up for a massive performance, physically, but more importantly, mentally. Like there is a lot of emotional drivers associated with that, and it's completely different to what the emotional drivers are from a Leinster perspective. There's probably more pressure on Leinster in terms of how they're even being spoken about by Franco Smith last week. Even it was touched on yesterday as well, by saying that they are the pinnacle of what everyone is striving for. And Jake White said, well, that's what but they're doing it in a very complimentary fashion that, is openly putting pressure on Leinster, because everyone's saying they're the best team and they're expected to win. So it's how I find all of that interesting, and how they're being very open. And I think Leinster's post match, since Leo spoke 2 weeks ago, they've been a bit more open as well. Joe McCarthy post game, around that. But like, that's good. I think all that's good. It's people being more open, more honest, and actually saying how they feel about certain things, which is a good thing. So it comes down to that mental preparation, how they manifest, how both sides are going to manifest those things that are definitely in their mind frame. Will lead to hopefully a really a ding dong battle of a final.
Yeah, I might come back to the Joe McCarthy comments, and there's a few other kind of bits around that as well later. I am finding that really interesting this week, and I'm kind of enjoying that, the way Leinster are taking all of that on board. Just in broad strokes, Birch, this weekend, Leinster have to win, simple as, and they won't get any great plaudits if they do it, but that's the benchmark they set themselves. They've talked so much about winning Europe, and unfortunately for themselves, they've kind of got themselves into this corner where winning the URC and getting to a URC semi-final, that is probably just level par for what they've put into it. And I know that is a very like high mark to set them, and it's a high expectation to put on them. But it's an understandable one, that an understandable situation that they found themselves in. Ultimately, they have to win this weekend.
Yeah, and how they handle that pressure will be interesting. Look, obviously they're trying to create a us against the world mentality, which is different than I think they've done since probably when Joe Schmidt came in. I think when Joe Schmidt came in, they focused on who they wanted to be, and hoped that would motivate them and lead them to success. And I think Lancaster built on that. And it's very hard. It's a really unusual one, because normally that's an underdog mentality, and usually underdogs are underdogs because they maybe don't have as much of what others have. Historically, it's very unusual for the team who have more than everybody else in terms of talent and probably budget and resources and all that stuff to have to play that card. But look at when you've had as many knockbacks as they've had, they obviously have to try something different. And I
But
think
could I correct you? It's not so much an underdog mentality, in my opinion. It's just everyone hates us.
yeah,
It's not
yeah, fair
everyone.
enough.
It's not everyone thinks we're not good enough. It's that everyone hates us, and I think there's probably a difference between the two of those.
Yeah, I do, but I think it started with like during the year how kind of ratty Leinster were about any mention of what they have, around budget. If you remember when Leinster were flying in the last 16 and a quarter final, there was certainly a lot of talk from the French media and English media around like this team are so stacked, and what resource they have, and Leinster didn't like that. So that's what I find strange. I think they probably would have been better off just owning that and saying, look, we've worked incredibly hard to create a system where the majority of players are homegrown, and they become internationals, and the model here means that the start internationals are central contracting. That helps us be able to have the money to have a bigger squad and also keep reinvesting and having high profile foreign players. But yeah, now they're trying to say that everyone hates them. And look, I don't think anyone. Sorry, look, I can't speak for everybody else. I don't think in the punditry world and the other coaches and other players, I don't think there's much hate at all. I think there's frustration from a punditry point of view. There's frustration that they haven't become serial winners in the competitions that they're in. And I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of opposition fans, because of how it's been set up, where it's obviously Super Province and three others, they do enjoy when Leinster don't win. They do enjoy, but that's normal sports rivalry. You know what I mean? I think that's actually quite healthy, because that kind of drives actual fans of your own province as well. When you're competing with people that you maybe feel that you're not a fan of every province. So that I don't see that. I don't really mind that. I think the issue is I think Leinster have got to the situation where effectively it's easy to mock them because of underperformance. And this team, it's really only I would say Northampton Saints, obviously, and they'll probably feel angry or frustrated that people are packing in Toulouse, La Rochelle, Saracens, Munster, etc. together. You know what I mean? But that's unfortunately the nature of Irish rugby is there's so little change in squads that effectively you don't start from scratch every year, even though obviously they want to. They don't. So that's probably leading to it. But look, I don't like I love players who show a little bit more. And whether I agree with Joe McCarthy or not, it's irrelevant. He had played a big game. He had a big performance. A performance full of anger, spite, physicality, and then he came and kind of gave an insight into what got him there. So fair play to him. Fair play to him. I admire him massively for not being afraid to say it. And maybe that's a turning point for Leinster. Maybe they've been too cliched and too safe and too similar. And maybe it's going to take a little bit of look. There's certainly been a lot of robust conversations the last couple of weeks in Leinster. You know what I mean? So I think maybe we saw a reaction to that on Saturday, and I don't think any of us doubt when Leinster are in the right place mentally, they win against nearly every opposition. You know they really do. But then when you don't perform at that level, i.e. Northampton, i.e. Scarlets, you have to ask questions of them. So once Leinster start playing to their best and winning, it'll flip the other way around where we're all about them again. That's just the reality of it, and it's not just ex-Leinster
That's the
players
nature
or
of
uh,
that's
or
the
Irish
nature of
pundits. This is across the world. It's across the world that everybody who looked at him earlier on in the year were like, "Oh, this team are set up to win." And then when they don't win, you have to ask questions. So it is fascinating and how they handle that pressure. And if the Bulls, like the Sharks, the Glasgow didn't start fast. Glasgow conceded to try the first real attack then strat. Okay, they bounced back, but they didn't get the conversion. And from there, they were just completely under-equipped to go toe-to-toe with Leinster. What other teams are saying about Leinster is, if it's close with 10 minutes to go, will they fold? That's like that, and that's actually what people they won't say it on the record, but that's what they're saying off the record, is that they want to have Leinster in a position where either they're chasing the game, or with 10 minutes to go, it's tight, and will they fold? And look at Leinster could argue that's very unfair, but it doesn't matter. That's what teams are using to try and build confidence when they play them, and until Leinster start closing out those tight games regularly, that's going to always be the narrative. And it's making it harder for them to win at the moment, but that's something they need to change.
Johnny, you were coming in there.
Yeah, no, just that, like in terms of that, like they're on a pedestal because the nature of their own success, of their foundations that they have from everyone spoke about from their schools the whole way through to the top. And then when you are on the top off the pitch, when everything is aligned and you keep producing and producing, but then when you don't produce the results, the nature of success means that people in the media, people who support, people who don't support you are going to have a cut off you. That's the reality of success in sport, success in life, that if you don't produce then when it comes down to the last 10, 15 minutes, and as you say, a lot of what Birch has said aligns with that, because when Northampton put out that 7-minute clip, which again I think is brilliant, it shows you an insight in what they spoke about. Other teams are using that in a different way now, because they said they're built differently. We're built differently to them. Like we have more connection in this group than than they do. And like though other teams are going to use that as a blueprint mentally as how we go on, how they go after a team like Leinster in that space. So I think it's, and the reality results, I don't lie, they haven't won anything over the last 4 years when they've probably, as Bert said, when they play their best rugby, they are the best team. And I think that's why they're there. People are saying that, but I think there has been a pivot shift from them and their communication style over the last 2 weeks since Scarlets. And as Bert said, he probably knows the type of conversations that have gone on behind closed doors. So there is going to be also a shift mentally in that, and how they use that. As I said at the start, and how they manifest it's going to be really, really important, because they need to get over the line this weekend, and when the game is in the melting pot, grab it by the clutch and grab it, and then go, right, we go do it, and we just go win it.
Yeah, I have to say, like, I actually really like the everyone hates us stuff. It's just fun. It's interesting. From a media point of view, I go to a lot of press conferences over the course of the year. I've been at a lot of press conferences with Leinster players and coaches where very little gets said because everyone's trying not to offend each other or trying not to make a headline. And when you have players who are like, I'm sure the players believe exactly what they're saying here. They have social media accounts. They're getting dogs abuse left, right, and centre when they lose matches, or people just laughing at the fact that they didn't do it. I'm sure they firmly believe it inside the four walls of the changing room. And I love the fact that they're willing to say it. Like, Johnny, I'd use Munster as an example. Down the years, how many times have we heard Munster players talking about, the backs to the wall stuff? And I'm sure you can talk from experience how motivating that's been down the years when people have doubted you and your Munster teammates in those changing rooms.
It's huge when you have that chip on a shoulder and you use it correctly. It's massive. Like, I was part of, a Leicester group, and
Leicester, bloody hell as well. You played with the full lot of them.
Forget, like, obviously Backy and Johne and those guys had retired and stuff, but like, there was a huge, there was a thing outside, like, everyone hates Leicester and you're a Leicester mute and this kind of stuff. But even remember Benny Kay standing up in a meeting when Heineke Mayer came in, and we were on one of our preseason camps, and he's like, I like that when we go to English camp, lads are like, you're just a Leicester mute, and and I was like, because that's us, that's who we are, and we've earned the right, like Benny said, like, we've earned the right to be called that, and that's because we're good and we're the best team in the league. And that's what, and like Munster is the same. When you get there in a different way, it was like, well, it's stacked against us and we're going to do this. And, like it is used in the right way. Having that chip on your shoulder, it is a real motivating factor. And being open about that is even better, because you own it. You're owning it then. Like that's something that I would have learned in England. Like, and as I said, like, you own that. You're like, yeah, we are. But like, that's not an arrogant thing, because look how many premierships we've won in the last 5 years. Look, so we are the best team in England. And if you have an issue with it, just look at the record. The problem is for Leinster is in the last 4 years, they can't say that because they haven't won anything. That's the problem. So you have to just use it in the right way. But again, this is good for rugby. People being more open, more honest. And we've spoken, like, back in January, we spoke about the Netflix thing. There was so much bland bullshit associated with that, where if you actually brought someone into what actually goes on behind closed doors, open it up, and people were more honest, and there was one thing where Freddie Stewart doesn't get picked for England in that net. And I was like, why didn't they make a big thing of that? Because that happens every Tuesday in every organization. And people then go for a coffee and they give out shit about the coaches, and that's nature, because, like, I think all this stuff is good for rugby because it brings people into an insight on what the players go through, what their families go through. And that's good. This is good. It's a good thing.
Slight tangent, Bernard. Do all players play better with a chip on their shoulder? What were you like? Were you more of a, were you better with an even keel or better riled up?
No, it depends on where you are in the season. The ideal scenario is, you're just so comfortable with what you're playing for and trying to win, that you don't need to get into that state. And that's the challenge for Leinster. Is I think that the vast majority of the time that they are just better in a good place, and they tend to win. And it's interesting. Like I think that like they themselves have admitted they didn't play that well against Northampton. You know what I mean? I think they've admitted that. They also, Leo said, staff and players, staff and supporters got ahead of themselves. So, was there complacency there? So if there was complacency there, like that's the hardest thing when you're winning regularly and you have, so many star players and they're playing for Ireland and getting selected for the Lions, etc. No, that happened after, but they knew there were going to be a lot of them selected. It's hard to not get that complacency. So whatever you got to do to try and rule that out. And it's like I would have thought I would have thought Leinster wouldn't be complacent this year because they've had so many near misses in Europe. But for whatever reason, it seems to have slipped into them that week, and it's hard. It's hard for coaches and players to be really sure, is everybody honest? Is everybody, fully aware of what the opposition can bring? But I suppose you could say it was hard to see that with Northampton, given what were they seventh in the league when they played them. So it doesn't really matter. Like this is the thing about, I suppose, winning teams who win regularly and lift silverware. They're very good at actually peaking and finishing the job. So Bordeaux a year ago got smashed in the top 14 final, lost a Champions Cup knockout game to Harlequins at home, like massive blows to them. But they obviously rectified that this year, and whatever they learned from it, they put into place. And I suppose that's probably what will really frustrate Leinster is, it's taken it's 4 years since they won a trophy, and it just seems from the outside that similar mistakes were made. And I think this, what you've seen in the last 2 weeks, is a genuine attempt to change things, which you have to admire. And now we'll see on Saturday, is that the missing link? Is that the missing link? Then when you win it, is that what you're going to use next year to go win it again, or do you find something else? So that's the challenge for the coaches, to create an environment and a mindset for the players, because we know the players technically, tactically, or physically are very good. But this weekend is a great opportunity for Leinster, and given where they come from, like I think this trophy for Leinster should be like Ireland win the Triple Crown, where it's a nice thing, but it's not open top bus stuff,
Yeah.
And it wasn't this year. We saw that. So because the narrative has changed in Irish rugby, that we see ourselves being championship contenders, and the URC in its own right is a very good competition. For Leinster, I think it's not a given because they haven't won it. But it will be important for them now. It's very, very important now. It's very important now because hopefully it gives them that push to be able to be better in knockout games.
Just want to talk about last weekend. So 37-19 win against Glasgow Warriors, Johnny. It wasn't perfect. There were a few chances here and there, a little bit of sloppy play, particularly in the first quarter. But ultimately, it's a 37-19 win where the scoreline flatters the opposition, who got a couple of late tries in the final quarter when the game was done. And add into that as well, Sam Prendergast left 11 points behind off the tee as well. So that could have been a much heftier difference between the two sides. But I don't know, if I'm putting myself into Leo Cullen's shoes, is the thing you're most pleased about is that there just looked to be a lot more life about Leinster on Saturday, which was probably missing in recent weeks. Like, it was the first time, I think, since that Northampton game where they didn't look like they were walking around a stone and a half heavier just from sheer pressure on the shoulders.
Yeah, I think there was a bit of bite in it, and the way they started kind of showed that. Like there was there was a more of an aggression in their contact zones. There was more of an aggression in their attack and their ball carry, and it felt like, right, let's go, we're going to do this now. That's kind of what it felt like watching it, and you just got that energy from it. I don't know what it was like there, but that's what it felt like on the TV compared to the previous week, where you say, where it was laboured and it was like, come on, let's just get through this and we get into, that was how it felt, how the energy felt watching their previous two performances after Northampton, where this was okay. We're in it. We go do it now. And there was that extra bite. Like the previous 2 weeks, I haven't seen a barge or anything kind of a post tackle work. They got one of those over the far side, and even Sam like drove in behind. But like there was more of that, which we were accustomed to seeing in the earlier rounds of European Cup and the URC. So, and I think that's a measure of where they're at mentally, is that post tackle stuff, because it's such a massive part of their defensive structure, is the work post tackle, how you can slow the ball down, allow you get width, and then allow you go hard. They still sucked up some tries on the edge, but I think that post tackle work is really important in that physical, and they had that this weekend.
And Birch, like reassuring ahead of this weekend, dominated in the air and dominated at the scrum. Two parts of the game that are going to be crucial this weekend.
Yeah, so they had two incredible access points into the game because of last week, and fairness to Thomas Clarkson and the whole pack. They scrummaged really well, got dominance there, and yeah, they won pretty much every area collision. That'll give them good confidence, because the Bulls will kick contestables and are quite aggressive on their kick chase and quite aggressive in the air for scraps as well. So you wouldn't expect it to be as one-sided, but that part of their game being in rude health is important. The scrum is a completely different challenge. I mean, the Bulls scrum compared to Glasgow is chalk and cheese, but Leinster will get confidence from the fact that they were dominant in that area. I'd be fascinated to see if they start Slimani this week, just to make sure you're not giving PRD. It's obviously helped the Leinster. PRD's refereeing again because his most recent memory would be of Leinster being dominant, and also he was pretty fair for Leinster on that tackle contest barge stuff. I think it was one penalty for I think Jack Conan, where he pushed the laws a little bit, but in general Leinster were allowed kind of pile in there. And again, they'll want to do that against the Bulls. The only thing is, the Bulls have the Leinster defence and the physicality that Leinster bring. They're well used to that. Like they've been playing South African teams who all have a similar mentality, and because Jacques Nienaber was effectively mentoring, the four franchises defence coaches, and now they have different levels of extremism in that, but and also physically as well. They're not as easy barge against, because they've normally dominated the first collision. So it's another step up for Leinster, and they'll be well aware of it. I think it's brilliant for them that they've had some setbacks against the Bulls, because that'll be fresh in their mind. They know they need to play well to win. And I think this Leinster team, if they play to their best, they win. And that's why they can be frustrating at times. But the challenge and opportunity for them is to do it on Saturday in Croke Park and lift the trophy that is badly needed.
Before we move on from Leinster, I want to mention Sam Prendergast as well. We spoke about him, Birch, last week, and I suppose maybe the reliance on him and probably giving him probably more minutes than he actually needed, and he probably could have been afforded the odd 20-minute rest here or there in matches. But just in general, last week, attack-wise, looked comfortable enough, had a couple of lovely little touches over the game. Defensively, there's still a lot of chicanery to try move him around the pitch and try limit, I suppose, his defensive frailties. But the kicking is now a worry off the tee. 3 from 8 at the weekend. As I mentioned earlier, 11 points left off the tee. In Cup rugby, like obviously last weekend it didn't have any material impact on the game. Excuse me. But in Cup rugby, that needs to be a hell of a lot sharper.
Yeah, and so you're talking about Leinster and talking about Leinster players. He's one of those. He's one of those who obviously will need this game to just reinforce, I suppose, how talented he is, how resilient he is, etc. Because there's no doubt over the last couple of weeks, he's looked like he's had a knock to his confidence, and why wouldn't he? But I think there's huge belief in him, in Ireland, in Leinster, in anyone who's known him. So a great opportunity to come back and show, look, I'm a clutch kicker. I missed a few last week, but thankfully it didn't matter to the team, but this week it will. And then obviously the challenge for Leo and is to basically, what do you do if his kicking is bad? You know what I mean? Do you let Geordie kick because you'd imagine Geordie starting, or do you make a change? But that's something that they'll have a plan made out for, and hopefully for Sam's point of view, he goes and has another solid game. Some of the things he's doing are outstanding, but fortunately, obviously, there's massive spotlight on his defence at the moment, and he's probably not. He's definitely not defending well enough to start to quieten those questions, or answer those questions. And then obviously, if you don't kick well, then on top of it, it even heightens the scrutiny more. So it's big pressure on him. I think. I certainly, he's capable of dealing with it and stepping up. But yeah, tricky spot to be in. And yeah, he'll hope the team get him on the front foot and he can show the other side of his game, the passing game. Because we know his out of hand kicking is still very, very good. And his game management is very good. But obviously, you can't have a low percentage place kicking and question marks around your defence long term.
Yeah, and John, like Leo Cullen, John, he's not a knee-jerk reaction kind of guy. He's not going to all of a sudden decide this week, okay, now Ross Byrne or Kieran Frawley is going to go in and start it out half in a final. He doesn't really work like that. So we're going to take it as a given. Sam Prendergast is going to be starting at the weekend. We've obviously spoken. You've known him a long time down the years through school. You've spoken as well previously about the resilience and kind of seeing him have a disaster early on in a big schools cup game and just seeing him go through the gears and get all that back together. I presume you're confident he can shake off all that stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I'm obviously I'm kind of blinded by my connection to him in some stages, but in reality, those two areas have to be better, as Birch says. He knows that. He works on it every day. But in terms of nailing your colours to the mast, I'd be first to nail them to the wall that he's going to get that right this weekend, particularly on the kicking side. He is a clutch kicker, and he needs to. I think he's going to show that this weekend. You back him to it, but I do think, as Bert says, if it doesn't go that way, then there will be opportunities for others to kind of step up. They have kickers in that space, but I'll, as I said, I'm a bit blinded, but I would certainly say he's gonna step up this weekend and knock those ones over this Saturday compared to last Saturday.
All right. So that is Leinster against the Bulls this Saturday evening, 5 p.m. kickoff in the URC Grand Final at Croke Park. The other news to get through, we're obviously a week on from the Ireland squad that was named probably a couple of hours after we did our podcast last week. But the recent development, Jack Ainger is into the Ireland squad because Finlay Bealham Birch into the Lions squad. Xander Fagerson's been ruled out. His injury hasn't cleared up. He's going to miss the whole tour. With Xander Fagerson out, Finlay Bealham was a no-brainer essentially to be called up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had heard, to be honest, that they were going to line them up anyway because of Tyke Furlong's injury. So I think he was joining the squad regardless. And maybe as one of those two extra players, just I think Tyke, my understanding is he may not play the first couple of games, but obviously they want to bring him. So they would have needed another tight head there anyway. Obviously, Will Stewart's involved with Bath this weekend, so again that would have Tyke and Will Stewart out of the original three, but now Xander Fagerson being injured just makes it a clear swap. So great for Finlay. He got a lot of game time over the last couple of years with Tyke's obviously injuries, and I think he's stepped up above and beyond what probably a lot of people maybe see on a regular basis for Connacht, if that makes sense. He's a very good player for Connacht, but he just seems to have this capacity to step up and just fit in seamlessly. And yeah, great for him. Great for Connacht to have three lines. And yeah, I think unfortunately in that position, I'd say they might end up maybe having to bring another player at some stage. It's just so tight on him. But yeah, hopefully Ty gets back, and it's tough on Xander Fagerson. In fairness, we saw how much Glasgow missed him last weekend,
and he had a great season.
Great season. And the last Lions tour, I think he had injury problems as well. So
Only played 3 games on the
three
last
games.
tour.
Yeah, so really, really tough on him, but great for Finlay Bealham, great for Conor Rugby, and great for Irish Rugby to have another one in there.
Johnny, like when I think of Finlay Bealham, I'm always fascinated by like talking about like sliding doors in people's careers. And 4 years ago, Tyke Furlong and Andrew Porter are this behemoth of a tight head combination for Ireland. And in the summer of 2021, Andrew Porter decides he's going to go over and play loosehead. And all of a sudden, there is, well, essentially a number 18 jersey up for grabs with Ireland. There is there's a place in an Ireland matchday squad up for grabs. And up until 4 years ago, Finlay Bealham had been in and out of Ireland squads. He'd played here or there, but he was never really part of that first team 23. And I do always wonder what would have happened, to several people's careers if Andrew Porter hadn't made that switch. Now, that element of luck goes in Finlay Bealham's favour, but in fairness to him, he's gone and grabbed it in the last few years. And at the age of 33, he's probably played his best rugby in the last 24 months.
Yeah, and he's always stood up when he really needed to in big moments. Like you look at the autumn series this year where he'd go off and come back on. Like, he really has stood up in pivotal moments when really needed to hold down a scrum. And there has been question marks over that, but when really needed, he's always got that 60 seconds out of him and control that area, and it's great for him. I think for Connacht to have 3 lines, as Bert said, is massive. It just gives another bit of momentum to Stewart and all of that, in terms of what those 3 guys are going to get out of this summer, what they're going to learn off other people. But yeah, it's great, and he's kind of been an unsung hero in terms of some, that has been so reliable, been decent with injuries, and really stepped up when Tyga's been out over the last for the last couple of seasons with his injury niggles.
Yeah, so we'll I presume anyway we're going to be seeing him playing against Argentina next week, because there aren't too many other options at the moment with the Premiership final this weekend. So congrats to Finlay Bealham on that. The domino effect, as we mentioned, Birch, Jack Ainger comes into the Ireland squad. Again, that pretty much felt like next cab off the rank in terms of what we've seen with Ireland A and emerging Ireland over the last couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. He's probably one of the lads who was hoping maybe Finlay might be given a summer off, or there might be an injury, because I think he's very close. And obviously he shares the workload with Finlay for Connacht. He's a big ball carrier. He's very deceptive. And the amount of yards he makes in contact are really important to Connacht when they're on the front foot. So great for him. Obviously has gone down to, was in Leinster Academy and then went down to Connacht and has taken his chance, building up a lot of game time. Still plenty of time on his side as well. And scrummaging has improved, but his ball carrying for me is exceptional. And yeah, it's great to see him get a crack at it.
Yeah, there's loads of interesting bits out of that Ireland squad. Johnny, you have Craig Casey in as captain. What a reward for him, and I'm sure he was someone who was on record at how much he was hoping to make a Lions tour. I reckon this has probably softened the blow for him ever so slightly, the chance to captain Ireland this summer as well. He's someone whose game has gone to another level probably since the World Cup, I would say, and had that really frustrating injury layoff this season. But since then has come back and has been right back to his best from the first game he played, pretty much.
Yeah, and like it's a real credit to him in terms of where his stature within the squad to be given that role. As a 9, he is the genuine heartbeat of Munster when he plays, and he plays for Ireland. Like it's been. Since the World Cup, he's really took a massive step forward, and I think it's brilliant for him, his family, and everything like that. But he obviously, you see all the social media stuff when Zebo was taking the piss out of him, but like he obviously is a really good character within. I don't know him personally. He's a really good character within the group, and that's so important. He'll also someone that's going to really drive standards for the group that's going in terms of the youth that's there, the exposure, the amount of uncapped players. he can really set a stall out for those guys that don't necessarily know him, to show this is what's required to be an Irish international. Even though we're playing Georgia and Portugal, that the standards aren't going to slip. So it is a big job. Like these tours are really important for the guys that are going to get their first caps and the guys that are going to get their third, fourth, fifth cap as well. But it's important that they know what's required, and to be given that that job shows where he is standing within the group, which is great to see.
In broad strokes, Birch, the squad in general, how pleased are you with the blend between it being, senior Ireland squad members in there? Obviously, Ian Henderson and Rob Herring haven't been brought. They've been kind of given the summer to get back to their full selves after a difficult season with injury. But is there a good enough blend there of this being a proper Ireland senior squad and just not becoming another Ireland A tour, if you know what I mean? Like,
no, it's definitely not that.
It's definitely
not that, Neil.
Okay.
It's a very much an Irish touring squad minus the lines, and I think it'd be taken very seriously by all the players involved, because they know how much Farrell reads into their performances on everything that they do. So obviously he's not there, but O'Connell and his coaching staff will be methodical in the reports that they give around everyone's performance. So it's huge opportunity. Hopefully we'll have some real bolters, players who take this chance, and when Farrell comes back from the Lions and goes to pick the squad in November, we'll be looking at this tour as the opportunity, as the time when people really stood up, like we did, for some players in emerging Ireland trips to South Africa. You could nearly pinpoint their emergence back to that. Even if it's a case of just being the opportunity to get ahead in the province in September. So I think it's really important for Ireland. We need to develop more depth. We've seen, the likes of Murray and O'Mahony, Pat retiring this summer. We need to find replacements for them, and hopefully we get a couple of real bolters in this tour.
To finish up, pretty much something we didn't get a chance to talk about last week. This the proposed R360 Rugby 360. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be called. I'm sure people have seen it by now, but it's a new proposed franchise league which is being backed by Mike Tyndall and lots of other rich people. Move over Rugby X, Rugby 12s. We've seen a few ideas like this down in the past as well. But essentially, according to reports, this proposed tournament would run on a franchise basis, turn professional rugby into a summer sport. Games taking place from April to June and August to September in destination stadiums across 16 weekends. London, Barcelona, New York, LA, Sao Paulo, Croke Park being thrown in there potentially as well. Bids for franchises already underway, apparently. Owners of NFL operations and Formula One teams expressing an interest, according to some reports. And it's hoped the competition could launch next year with 8 men's teams and 4 women's sides before expanding to 10 men's teams in a couple of years. We've spoken. It's funny, Birch, we spoke about the Club World Cup a couple of years ago, and you made a point that obviously you don't want to be too critical of people who are trying to do something different and shake things up ever so slightly, and people who actually have an idea to try re-energize the game. But like for me with this idea, ultimately I can't find any unique selling point in this idea other than the players will make lots of money.
Yeah, and I don't think they would make lots of money for long, because I think it's doomed to fail. I think the challenge is, like, the game as it stands is looking for increased exposure, increased revenue, but effectively you're starting from scratch with these franchises. Like even in the NFL, where you can move a team, a city, you're still buying the LA Raiders as such. Just use them as an example. So
a mega brand
that's already established and has fans. Whereas this is just basically made up teams. I think I don't think you'll ever get off the ground, to be honest. And I admire people for trying. But I think for the World Rugby to sign off on it, the repercussions are so the players can play for for these franchises and play for international rugby. So it's not killing the international game, but effectively would hamper a Leinster or a Leicester or a Leon, because like are their fans going to be impressed when there's no Caelan Doris or there's no um, Freddie Stewart, that's the reality of it. So I think the effect you can have on what's below, which is really important, would be too great. But again, I don't want to knock people who are. I think, to be honest, the people involved in running this are in it for the money. They're going to get a cut out of it, but they are trying to I suppose make the game bigger. I just don't think this is the way forward for it.
Your thoughts on it, Johnny?
It's kind of like live, really, I suppose, isn't it? Like it's about money, and like for me, I think it's the whole rugby world needs to sit down and have a global season more so than anything else. Than going at something like this where it's just going to create more a divide, and you're splitting resources. Where if the money that they had came in and you actually sat down correctly, with someone and actually got a global season correct, in a correct position where there wasn't so much movement throughout. I think that'd help. And yeah, rugby does need more innovation, or it does need more openness, as we've already spoken about earlier on. So something does need to change. But I like looking at this at the face of it. I'm not sure this is the answer. But
yeah, yeah, like I'm willing to hear more about it, but ultimately, in everything I've read about it and from what someone like Mike Tyndall has been talking about, why it'll work, I can't see anywhere in the plan how this will actually work. It's just kind of talking about there will be lots of money involved, which therefore it will be a good product. But look, I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it as well. Just before we finish up, I do have one more thing to bring up. I was doing a bit of browsing around this morning, seeing is there any extra little talking points to throw into the pot before the podcast started. And Johnny, I came across on Planet Rugby Bernard Jackman's Team of My Life.
yeah.
So Bernard Jackman has played what I think is the best 15 is it played with or against or something like that.
Yeah,
Ever
but
the
without
ever the
not
ever
in
the
Ireland.
politician,
No.
ever the politician, Johnny.
No.
No Irish players are included it because he didn't want to piss anyone off. But here, what do you think of this now? What do you think of this for a team? So front row, Andrew Sheridan, Warren Gatland, Julian White.
Yeah,
Second
White.
row, Martin Johnson, Jim Hamilton. Back row, Lawrence Delalio, Martin Williams, Sebastian Chabal. Mike Phillips and Johnny Wilkinson in the halfbacks. Yannick Jouzion and Will Greenwood in the centre. Johne Lomu and Jason Robinson on the wings, and Christian Cullen at full back. Not a bad 15, is it?
How the hell do you have Jimbo in there? Like, how,
Because I used to
that's just
Jimbo,
to going on the piss or something. There's
no.
way.
I used to have nightmares about Jim Hamilton because he used to be waving and shouting at me as I was throwing the ball in. And I often did throw it into him by mistake. So no, he was just a nightmare to play against. He was just so annoying, wasn't he? Yeah, Johnson broke my nose my first ever game for Sale Shark. He just slipped us behind the scrum, and basically said, "Yeah, fuck off back to Ireland or whatever." But yeah, I played with. It was just much easier if you get away without having to name Irish players. You're better off, Neil.
Yeah, Johnny, I presume that's the only reason you didn't get in ahead of Jason Robinson or John Lomu.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, or Christian Cullen for that matter. I don't know. But just on the Leicester thing, just want to mention Benny Youngs and Dan Cole. They're finishing this weekend. I was there when they both started, so I remember Youngsy. I think George Ford is now the youngest ever Tiger, but Youngsy came off the bench in the Premiership final in 2007. Against Wasps, and I think he wasn't even 18, so I don't think he's even allowed drink on the bus on the way home. And then I was there the day that Dan Cole passed his driving test in his full Tigers kit to try and make sure that the guy who was running the driving test made sure that he knew he was in the Leicester Academy to try and give him any kind of tip he could get to try and get his driving test. But I was actually looking for that photo. I couldn't find it. I was sure it was on Facebook somewhere, but I couldn't find it. But yeah, two great lads. Yeah, like what more can you say about them and what they've given to Leicester as a whole? Just amazing, but off the pitch, two absolute legends. So fingers crossed, we'll see them raising the trophy on Saturday.
Yeah, that's shaping up to be a brilliant Premiership final. Leicester against Bath. I didn't see the Leicester match now on Saturday, but I saw Bath and Bristol on Friday night, which was an absolute, well, a cracker for 50 minutes, and then Bath made sure it wasn't a cracker. But yeah, shaping up to be a brilliant Premiership final. We'll call it there, lads. Thanks, Berners. Thanks, Johnny. Brittany Hogan and Edel McMahon coming up next on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Right, so it's just over 10 weeks and change until Ireland kick off their Rugby World Cup campaign against Japan in Northampton on Sunday, the 24th of August. The squad are in week 2 of their pre-season camp at the High Performance Centre in Dublin. A 37-player squad that'll be whittled down before they head off to England in August. Delighted to say I've been joined on the pod by 2 of that squad. Brittany Hogan and co-captain Edel McMahon are with me this week. Guys, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks for having us on.
So, as I said, it's week 2 of this pre-season World Cup training camp. Edel, I remember before the last game of the Six Nations against Scotland, you were up for media that week and you were talking about the downtime between the 5 weeks between the end of the Six Nations and coming into camp at the start of June. And you made a point of saying, like, you would have told a lot of the players, and the players would have been told by the coaches as well, to actually sit back and relax for a little while during that 5 weeks, because it's going to be a fairly full-on summer. Here's the opportunity now, like school report. What did you both get up to on your summer holidays?
I can say for a fact there are some people, maybe including myself, that probably didn't stick to that. For different reasons, obviously naturally through little bit to niggles and stuff, but yeah, I remember specifically speaking about Nod, actually, who I said was one person that would probably be the hardest to tell to chill out. But in her words, well, it's my downtime, so I can do whatever I like with that. So I think I saw her in most days in camp, whether I was doing a bike session or extras. So she spent that, I guess, exactly how she wanted to.
So what did you get at? Was there a holiday in there? I did see on your Instagram a good bit of work on the farm. So I mean, that's a bit of training in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I got a few days away to Clee and Claude's wedding in Greece, and it was gorgeous. It was such a nice time to kind of decompress, head away, and just enjoy kind of like those friendships that you have off the pitch. And was joined by a few other teammates and friends from rugby that have retired. So they were a lovely few days, but then I got to go home down to Clare for, I feel like it's been since Christmas that I actually spent like more than 2 days at home. So that was lovely. The weather was amazing. And I just like being at home, like getting a few jobs done, feeling fulfilled with your day when you're outside during the day and getting a bit of farming done.
How did you fill your time, Brittany?
I had a proper school holidays, summer break. The first week, to be fair, was kind of like admin, getting life stuff done that you hadn't, emails or tidying your room, that kind of thing. But then me and a few of the girls, Fiona, Sive and India Daly, we went to Split. We went to Croatia for I think it was like 6 nights. And then I went away with my partner to Gran Canaria for 7 nights. So I had a great time away with it. UV was above 2, which it is in Ireland, and spent it just chilling out. And we had some remote training the last 3 weeks of it. So I was in Gran Canaria for one of those and just kind of running on the grass. That was the only grass that was in Gran Canaria, to be honest, and gymming on some CrossFit gyms. Yeah, just getting away from it. HPC is somewhere that turns into your second home, and it's nice just to refresh the mind. So very important.
Oh, I think we might have. Oh no, Brittany, you're back there. When you came back in for the start of camp last week, Edel, like, I imagine you're well used to it at this stage and all that, between the WXV and Six Nations campaigns and everything. But did it feel a little bit different coming in, knowing that it was to get ready for a World Cup? Was there a bit of kind of butterflies coming in the door that first time?
Yeah, it was. I suppose that was a big focus point for us as a squad, was making sure that this felt different and felt special, because it's been a long time since this team has, I suppose, for the group, it even played in a World Cup, and you want to make sure that it's not the same as a summer series, or it's not the same as the Six Nations, because a World Cup is really special. It comes around every 4 years, or in our case, it's been one the last 8 years. So yeah, I think there was already excitement around that, but even the inclusion of a couple of newer players heading into the squad, a couple of returning from injury, so that created a really good, I suppose, excitement around, like, this is starting, like, we're getting going.
And Brittany, how does the block break down now? So as I said, it's just over 10 weeks to the first game of the World Cup, but it's just over 7 until the first of the warm-up matches against Scotland on the 2nd of August. How does the block look over the next 7 or so weeks until you're out in the pitch playing a game?
So with the 5 weeks off, you kind of come a little bit more deconditioned, but that's just what you need. Like, your body needs rest after a good campaign in the Six Nations. So we had 2 full weeks off, and then 3 kind of returning to gym. So they kind of hit the ground running last week anyway in pre-season. So that was our first out of, so we're running in 2 blocks now before the warm-up games. So we'll have a 3-week block. We'll have a deload week where we'll remotely train at home. We'll have another 3-week block where we'll kind of put more rugby into it instead of running. And then we'll have a fully off week to start us to, like, just reset the mind, to start us fully into, right, okay, now we've got warm-up matches this weekend and this is World Cup time now. So it's kind of run very well, where we have those quite hard 3 weeks, 1 week off, hard 3 weeks, 1 week off, but we're still kind of getting all the work done, and we front load our week. You have the weekend off, do some remote training on a Saturday, but it's just so nice to have that kind of mixture and balance of being in the squad, and then, which is really high intense, and then being able to switch off at the weekend, coming back in, learning what you have to do and analysis and stuff. But yeah, that's how it's going to work in the next couple of weeks.
Like everyone who's played sport at any level, like, dreads a bit of pre-season, but I think things Edel have obviously moved well on from just flogging people and not seeing a ball for the first 3 weeks of pre-season. I imagine years is along the lines of what most modern environments are now, where there's obviously a lot of hard work in those weeks, but so much of it now is centered around the ball and centered around match situations. Can you talk us through a bit about, like, what you're doing on the pitch to kind of blend the rugby stuff and the conditioning stuff all together?
Yeah, so the structure of the week, I suppose, like you said, everything that's done conditioning based is with a ball in hand, so it requires decision making as well. So while you're under that, like, fatigue, the cognitive function needs to be high, and that's been really kind of pushed. I suppose an example of last week, Monday, kind of install and getting through our bits and our launchers and our set pieces, and then Tuesday, Tuesday was a hard day for the girls. Between kind of sets, but high tempo, high ruck speed, collision kind of, looked after. And then we come into Wednesday where it's a bit more of a technical aspect again. So it's a lower load. And then tomorrow now will be our tough Thursdays. And that will be like a ball. Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole squad had a bit of a little bit of angst around what Thursday, because I suppose we hadn't done that as a squad yet, and what it was going to look like. But yes, it's like there's different teams that are collecting points to add that little bit of competition element to it. Front rows, back rows, centers, back threes, all in mini breakouts, having conditioning blocks, and then in between you have those conditioning games. So that's where the ball, like the rugby IQ, kind of comes into under that fatigue. So that it's so much easier to chase after a ball than to be running aimlessly up and down the pitch or hitting cones. So it's really good that aspect of conditioning is brought in, but along with the cognitive function, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to think when you're under that much stress. So it's actually great that we are getting that exposure kind of double-ended with rugby and with the conditioning.
What's on the social side of things, what's happening there with the squad? Because, like, there's always a lot that needs to be done just to kind of stave off the cabin fever. It's a long time together, a long time without playing matches as well. So what can you tell us about what's going on in there? Who are the heads of the social committee?
Oh, well, it's handy because I'm here.
Yeah. You've got
Very
one.
handy. You've got one of me here. I think there's 5 of us: myself, Eve, Noddy, Ruth, and Grace. So we just kind of try and get that on, like, off the field connection within the group. So it's really, really important for our green wave is that, like, we're so connected on the pitch, but we try and be the most connected team off the pitch as well. And you're just so much more willing to do more on the pitch and run that extra meter, hit that extra rock on the pitch if you know the person a little bit more off. So we try and put in as many things as we can at the moment, just because of the kind of, we're in the first block, so it's more pre-season vibe. The girls are more tired in the evening, so we kind of stick it to like 30 to 45 minute relaxing activities or quizzes, should I say. Like last night we did paint and no secco night. So we all had like you were with your roomie, and you had paint, you had I think, what was it, it was Mr. Price's apple sparkling poppy, I don't even know what it's called, but it was like appletizer, Mr. Price version. And we were all sitting there with our sparkling juice, and you had like a clock running. So we had a half-an-hour clock. Every 5 minutes you'd swap your painting with your partner, and just kind of like interactive, creatively, just see what they see, and then you go completely opposite way. So yeah, that was good fun to see where people's brains went. Some people were a
Very
lot better
dark
than others,
pictures.
but it was all good fun. Yeah, yeah, a lot of Halloween themes and
The
dark
girls
vibes, but
you ran a quiz with
um,
Cotters last week as well, and I suppose anyone that knows Cotters knows how committed he is to his quizzes, and yeah, they've been great fun. And like you said, it's when it's only, I suppose, 30 to 60 minutes when we're in a busy block, it actually is a really nice decompression in the evening, and like I said, a connection with the squad. But I think we're going to get a couple of people to do some commitments for the World Cup. Maybe rope Dennison. He doesn't know this yet, but I know he did before, and I reckon we can definitely get him again for sure.
What, dye his hair again or something, is it?
We have to keep it original now. We have to come up with something new, I think. But he's definitely, yeah.
something new and something
Brittany,
worse.
tell me, is this a self-appointed role you've put yourself into, or like a self-appointed committee? Is it a dictatorship? How did you end up in this position of power?
I actually couldn't tell you. I was probably one of the only ones who volunteered a couple of years ago, and probably about 4 years ago now, and I've never come off it since, because it's just that role that there is a lot of effort that goes behind the social activities. Like we organise the outings as well. To be fair, Elaine, with the World Cup, she's going to be, I'm not going to say exactly what, just in case the girls are listening, but just there will be organising like outings like throughout the World Cup to make sure that we're getting out of the hotel, that cabin fever like you mentioned. But yeah, I volunteered. Me and Grace were the first two, and then we've just kind of roped people along. Nod has come in from traders, as she's done her role so well, so we've appointed her. But a dictatorship in that way, where we just force people to come into the social group, and no, it's great fun. They all really enjoy it, and it's such valuable work for
Yeah, that's the way to do it, I suppose. In terms of then the building towards the World Cup, obviously there's been a change since the Six Nations. James Scaesbrook is in as defence coach. Hugh Hogan is gone. Like, Edel, it's obviously not ideal losing a coach a few months out from a World Cup, but how has that impacted you? How have you been able to kind of maintain a bit of continuity with a coaching change like that?
Yeah, obviously, like we a lot of respect for Hugh, and for pretty much wish him well. Like we as a squad, really valued the input he gave into us. With James coming in, trying to get that continuity. So in fairness, we had a very good sit down with James to talk about like what his principles are and what he was kind of looking to bring in, and bring his like stamp on the squad, but also keep kind of some principles the same. And where he thinks he can kind of develop and push our defence even further. So he's actually taken that on really well. He's got a couple of really cool ideas that I think the squad are really looking forward to doing. So that's been a work in progress, getting to know him and stuff. And he actually shares a very similar passion anyways, to the way we have been playing as a squad. He's done a lot of work with over the breakdown with the back rows and centres there just today. So yeah, really looking forward to like seeing his kind of passion filter in through the squad. And what's really kind of, I suppose, the best part about it is that it's a collaborative relationship. So he's not just coming in saying, "All right, this is what I'm bringing. These are my principles, and this is how we're doing it." He's sitting down with players to kind of go get an understanding of like, okay, what do you want to achieve? What languages do you want to use? What words do we want to use? How do we keep continuity, but also keep pushing us to be better players as well? So, yeah, Brittany has anything extra to add?
No, it's a really exciting role for him to come into. Defence is obviously a foundation of our Irish team. Like we're known for being a tough team and a tough outfit to break down. So he has a good challenge in his hands, especially with the amount of questions that we give him. But no, it's very exciting, and he's bringing some fresh, fun ideas. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes in our internal games or warm-up games coming through.
Brittany, then, like, with the way the Six Nations ended, it was a really frustrating way for it to close off after what had been like a promising campaign that was kind of building a little bit week on week on week. Do you just have to kind of take that now and flip it into whatever kind of a positive you can? That, look, this is a splash of water in the face for us, a little reminder that you can't be complacent any week you go out there. Maybe 12 months ago, this Ireland team were probably coming in under the radar, but does that result probably emphasize the fact now that nobody's kind of taking you for granted anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, you go first. So Harry, can't see your face when Neil's talking, so I never know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. We have been considered underdogs in the past, and people kind of wouldn't respect us or wouldn't know exactly the style that we play, defensive attack, our tactics, etc. Even at the start of whenever Scott came in, people still didn't actually realise how good our team was. Once we started believing in each other, once we developed a good culture off the field, that wanted to work hard for each other on the field, our tactics just kind of are married up into that, and we got some performances on the pitch that we were very, very proud of. But that takes away the element of surprise. And I suppose in the Six Nations there, we did come afterwards pretty disappointed, just in our I suppose because we were so successful in WXV and the way that we were growing and the trajectory that we were going on, we did hope, and our goal was to achieve that one place higher to beat Scotland at the end. But we can't we can't fault what we done. The glimpses of excellence like that we were so close to beating France, who we might meet in the World Cup, which is really important for us to know that we could beat them. So that just gives us that confidence. Yes, okay, they beat us, but we're still confident that if we met them in the World Cup, we'd be able to do a job. And I suppose that and the first 50 minutes against England, that like if that doesn't give you confidence again, I don't know what would. Like we really held it up to those two teams at the very start, but it just means that it's like, as you said, that complacency. I don't know if it was complacency within the squad. It was just Scotland were really, really up for that game, and like full credit to them. Like they performed exceptionally on the day. We of course had a couple of HIAs and a couple of things didn't go our way that day, but no excuses. Kind of like we're on everybody's there from 1 to 36. Like we all need to perform on the pitch, and we all are coached to perform on the pitch. So it was just one of those days that you can kind of learn from and get over. But yes, we still are pretty confident after that campaign.
And Edel, like, I mean, I'm sure it puts a nice bit of fire into you as well coming into the summer then.
Yeah, I know. I only to reiterate what Brittany was saying, like it's, we understand where we are, so we're probably our own worst critics, I guess, when performances or dips in performances where we could have seen off a game, I suppose, really kind of hurt us more than they probably seem on the outskirts, or like said, that 50-minute performance against England. Like we're taking all the confidence from those and building on those. But like I said it after the Scotland game, even the players who came on getting that exposure and almost that confirmation of confidence in them, being like, you can and come on and add a role and add a job. And we know that everybody knows, where they're supposed to be. Everyone brings in the energy, and like everyone's delighted for everyone to be getting their opportunity as well to showcase what they've been doing and how hard they've been working all campaign. Like you saw Jane and Aoife, who've been in for the whole Six Nations, finally get their opportunity at the end of the Six Nations. And although the result didn't go our way, everyone is very proud of them, of how they've stuck it out, how they've grafted, and how hard they've worked to even get that opportunity. So like it's building on those moments, building on that connection, and building on the confidence of the glimpses of excellence that we can produce against teams and top tier teams, but also, understanding where we are. We're not underdogs anymore. We don't have that element of surprise. So we have a standard of excellence that we strive to be as players. So we take a lot of that. Yeah, is it maybe fire in the belly? But it's more like taking away the complete emotion of it and being more clinical, and bringing that into training every week, so that when we hit the ground running, that we have a bank of confidence behind us.
And when it comes to the World Cup, then Edel, like, has there been a stated aim in the group, a stage to that, like a benchmark that you want to be reaching? Is it a quarterfinal, semi-final? Is it a final?
We want to be on the road to Twickenham. We want to be heading to London. I think every team that goes to a World Cup wants to try and achieve that, and I definitely think this squad is certainly capable of that. And yeah, we've said openly as a squad that we want to be heading to Twickenham.
Brittany, like you mentioned it when you were talking about that Scotland game, and a couple of things didn't go right, like kind of went against you with the injuries, and obviously Dorothy Wall was the main one, and that was only a week or so after Erin King had been ruled out of the World Cup as well. I'm sure those two things and what's happened to those two players, it probably gives you a perspective and an added motivation that you kind of can't take anything for granted over these next couple of months. And does it just kind of fill you with, I suppose, the desire to put everything you can into each day of the camp? And like, I suppose in a roundabout way, I'm kind of trying to say, like, you can't kind of just assume you'll be there at the World Cup. You just have to go out and put your best foot forward.
Yeah, definitely. And like those two players are such highly thought of individuals in our squad. Speaking about Dorothy, she's been around since for the past 6-7 years, and she didn't qualify for the last time. I was in the same squad as her in Parma whenever we failed to qualify for the last World Cup, and like I'm just absolutely heartbroken for the pair of them. But it's one of those things that you can't take for granted. Like seeing them around HPC at the moment, they're still absolutely buzzing for the squad. They're still involved in things. They're still wishing us well. And that just goes to show, like off the pitch, like how strong our culture actually is that Doro and Erin don't care who's on the pitch. They just want the team to succeed and do well. And they're going to do everything that they can to do so. The same as Sam, the same as Tash, beforehand in the Six Nations and WXV, like people who have been injured for a long period of time coming back in AV. Like it's just things that it makes it so much sweeter whenever you see people coming back into the environment and like working and grafting so hard in the background to show. It just reminds you how much the green jersey means. And like sometimes I know it's not forgotten, but there will be some days where you're really in, say for example tomorrow in our tough Thursdays, you'll be blowing out your you'll be blowing out your backside, and then you'll see Sam, who's literally returning on the sideline doing her rehab runs. She's so close to being back. Tasha's so close to being back, just there cheering you on. And it's just like they are working so hard because they want to be where we are. So we cannot take that for granted for a minute, for a day, for a second, and especially whenever we run out in that World Cup. Like we're gonna be thinking about those, like Daro, Erin, like they're sorely missed, but the way that they have trained during the Six Nations, the way that they've produced the foundation, say for example, of our lineouts, and now we're just reaching to make sure that we don't miss them. So on the pitch, we can't afford to miss them whenever we want to succeed. We have to be able to fill their boots, and yeah, it's just really exciting. We're obviously heartbroken for the two of them, but it just goes to show, and it's kind of a little bit scary where it was like, right, this actually could happen to anybody. So let's just make sure that we enjoy every single second of it.
And finally, before I leave you go, I might just put to both the whole summer and the whole impact that this World Cup could have on the game in Ireland, but the game globally as well, where it's like commercially, it's going to be the biggest Women's Rugby World Cup ever. It's happening in the biggest marketplace for women's rugby in the world at the moment in England. It's so close to home. I imagine there's tons of friends and family who are going to be going over there. It's pretty close to being a home World Cup geographically for Ireland. There's so many things lining up, Edel, that like if ever there was a summer to take advantage of a World Cup, is this the one?
Yeah, I know. Like you said, it's the closest to a home World Cup that we'll have in a long time, and since the last one. But you know, it's not just for now as well. It's you want to make sure legacy that's left afterwards, and that becomes a new benchmark for where women's rugby and where women's sport is, because that is such a huge role for us as a squad. And our higher purpose is to inspire and leave that green jersey in a better place so that young girls can support and drive the professionalism of the game even more on. And you mentioned about like commercial viability and marketing and the whole shebang, that it all comes into play for athletes, you know, in this era at the moment, and like getting the backing of Ireland and getting the back of the inspiration for our young girls, for our families, our friends. We want to make people proud, but we want people to come and support us as well, and get on ferries, get on plane trips, or watch it at home. You know, we want to inspire everybody, and that is a huge goal for us as a squad. Like you said, it's literally next door. So yeah, I don't know, Brittany, you can if you want to add into that. I suppose I can't.
Yeah.
Words the magnitude of where this could bring the game, and I really hope it doesn't just be an event. It's the start of something, and that England isn't just known as the global star of women's rugby. That, you know, Ireland wants to take that on, other nations want to take that on, and they want to enrich that sport in that country.
Yeah, like I would just extend on what Tricky is saying, is that it's the perfect timing for such a global event. Women's rugby, women's sport in itself is just accelerating, is becoming so popular all around the globe, and like people are just starting to realize what a special sport rugby is, and how actually it is equivalent to the men's side of the game, and how we could have those crowds, we could have those kind of size, magnitude of games, etc. Like the final in Twickenham's nearly been sold out, or it has been sold out. Like these kind of things goes to show that our game is special, and it is worth investing in, and it is worth going to support. And just one thing on the supporters, like I'll forever have in my mind that game in Musgrave Park whenever we were playing England, like the sold out Musgrave Park, like the record crowd. Like you completely underestimate the amount of emotion and the amount of energy that a home crowd and that Ireland, like the Irish supporters and the Ireland fans, give the team. And for it to be in England, which is only a stone's throw away, just means that like we need everyone that we can get. And if that means that you take the ferry over with your family, you do, because you're able to. England, this is probably going to be the best opportunity for people to come and do that. And for us to get to London, we need as many people behind us as we can. So yeah, I'll always have that game in Musgrave Park in my mind, because the supporters are absolutely phenomenal that day, and they just gave us that energy for the 50 minutes. We wouldn't have been able to get that performance without them. Like, it was class. So just urging people to come along. It's going to be some spectacle of an event, and yeah, it's really exciting for women's rugby in Ireland.
Yeah, so it's Northampton for the first two games against Japan and Spain, and then on to Brighton for the final pool match against New Zealand. And who knows after that. Edel, Brittany, thanks a million for joining us on the RTÉ Rugby podcast. Enjoy tough Thursdays tomorrow and the rest of the World Cup camp. I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again in August. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.